Good morning, and so today is the backdrop. You have our lovely Portuguese weather. Yes, it's raining again. So, starting the reading of chapter 6, which I think I might do in two parts because it's quite a long chapter and I'll get tongue tied. So, there we go, but we'll see. So, chapter 6, Merlina. Following mine and Stephen's contact with the veterinary clinic, where the cat had gone, the plan resurfaced to get Merlina spayed. Merlina was a dog that had made good. She had been born on a patch of wasteland near a supermarket, where pickings were often rich, but where the amount of traffic could be a hazard. The little black and tan bundle of fur had come into the world on a September day, while temperatures had remained pleasantly warm. As autumn established itself, the usual rain that accompanies it in Portugal turned the nights cold, and though the puppy's mother tried to protect all three of her puppies from the dangers of people, cars, and dropping temperatures, it had not been possible. The puppy had found a home in Potato with us when she was less than a couple of months old. We had found her near the roundabout, on which there were often 3 or 4 stray dogs, and she had needed no persuasion to approach me and escape from life on the streets. Of course, if we had changed the dog's life in a big way, then the change she had made to our lives was no less marked. From our second days in Potato, overtures to friendship had been made by Maria, the more patient half of the Portuguese couple who were our nearest neighbours. Maria was a small, slight woman whose lined face gave away every one of her 80-something years. Yet despite time doing its best to steal her dignity, she still managed to carry herself with great pride. The sincerity of the sentiments behind the arms of vegetables she had given us could not be disputed, and since those initial good wishes and welcome presents, a firm friendship had developed between her and us. There was no lesser goodwill from her husband in those first years, but his attitude towards his 2 English neighbours differed from that of his wife. Going hand in hand with Maria's patience was her ability to paraphrase. So when we had not understood her, she would try to reword the sentence. The Major did not possess this trait, and so when the conversations between us and Maria also involved her husband, he was often heard saying, "Non intendem." And although it was sometimes true, the passing of time meant that we did increasingly understand, but lacked the skill to reply spontaneously. Contradicting her husband, Maria would jump maternally to our defence with a quick "Eles entendem," and they used to make us smile. In time, the Major too began to pass more and more time in conversation with us, and the passing of years changed the dynamics of the relationship between the 4 of us. In place of the tuition which we had received in planting and sowing various crops, were afternoons where all of us sat around the fire in the Major and Maria's kitchen, or on old stone steps, half in, half out of the sun. The spark the Portuguese couple had demonstrated during those first conversations continued to ignite as they contradicted each other over this date or that name. Sometimes exchanges were done gently, sometimes a greater force, and they never lost their ability to make Stephen and me smile, nor the couple themselves. And we like to think that a similar dynamic was what old age had in store for our 2 sparky personalities. The relationship we had forged with the Major and Maria was not greatly altered when Merlina arrived, but friendships with other neighbours deepened as daily walks made the parties more visible to each other on a regular basis. For me, it was being accompanied by Merlina when Stephen was working or engaged in his music that first gave me the confidence to stop and have a drink with Manuel T without the moral support of my husband. Although Manuel was a friend with whom we socialised on Sunday afternoons, Steve and I still relied heavily on the security of each other, having someone by our sides in the many day-to-day happenings that we encountered. Our language abilities had improved substantially, but communicating in Portuguese was still something that was likely to cause misunderstandings or embarrassing silences. And so for me, having the unpredictable bundle of mischief and fun which was Merlina accompanying me on my visits to Manuel created a topic of conversation and interest. Being far away from home and remembering my four-legged companion brought forth a feeling of melancholy. Merlina had grown into a beautiful-looking dog whose colouring and markings remained, as had originally appeared, similar to that of a German Shepherd, though she had reached less than two-thirds in the size of the bulk one. The dog was a strange mixture of confidence and insecurity. With friends, she was relaxed and a free spirit, who happily amused herself by running around in long grass, trying to uncover moles in loose ground, or dislodge lizards from dry stone walls. She protected her home and her adopted family with deep, threatening growls and barks at the gates of our house. And on the rare occasions that strangers were encountered while on our walks, she generally stopped them in their stride with a low rumble which sounded menacing as she stood her ground on the narrow, isolated tree and bramble-lined paths. With her ears erect, deep chest, broad shoulders, and athletic concave stomach, Merlina would make most people doubt the wisdom of a confrontation. But much of it was bluster, and she perceived strangers as a threat from which she would often bolt if approached. Ironically, it was the people wishing to befriend a dog who frightened her the most, and one of her neighbours demonstrated this most effectively. Fernando Bacalhau was one of the friendliest people of his generation in Potato. He was a man of slightly greater than average build, not particularly softly spoken, and not hesitant or unsure in his actions. Yet there was something about this neighbour of ours that embodied the true meaning of the word gentleman. Fernando was married to one of the twins who lived in the village, and initially the confusion that the two Englishmen had with the sisters seemed highly likely to be further muddled by the fact that they both happened to be married to men named Fernando. However, as luck would have it, for us, if not for Fernando number two's family, Senor Day was forced to accept employment in South America. And this, at the very least, avoided confusing the two Fernandos in everyday conversation. Senor Bacalhau knew us mostly through his mother-in-law, a pear-shaped woman who looked like a Russian doll. But despite us having lived in the village for almost a year, his encounters with us had been few. The reason for the lack of contact between the three of us had nothing to do with likes or dislikes, but was due to the circumstances that kept the Portuguese man away from home. He, like many men in their late 40s, early 50s, who did not work in Portugal's public sector, was a lorry driver, earning a living transporting goods such as timber around the country and across the border to Spain, or fulfilling contracts with France. Similar to most of his neighbours, Fernando and his extended family also cultivated a few crops around the village, either for their own consumption or for the goats, sheep, pigs and chickens that they kept. It was because their fields were not near our house that Fernando's path had rarely crossed with ours. But when the little pup, with two distinctive light tan eyebrows on her black head, had appeared in Potato, Fernando was one of those people who began seeing more of Stephen and me. One afternoon, Senor Fernando was in his fields when he saw the stout puppy bounding along ahead of Os Ingleses. The dog didn't see the man until she was within a metre or two of where he had been collecting pumpkins. As Merlina sensed a change and looked up, she was surprised by the large figure which appeared to spring suddenly from the long grass in which her nose had been buried. Fernando crouched down and called the dog over in an excited voice, "Andica!" But she did not know what to make of the man, and although he did not appear to be a threat, the puppy's first few weeks of life on the streets had taught her to be wary of people she did not know, and especially of sudden movements. Unfortunately for Fernando, he fitted both of those descriptions. Yet, in a show of friendship, the Portuguese man began advancing towards the dog, and as he did so, he extended his hand in a movement designed to reach the animal and ruffle its fur. Merlina gave a bark, springing sideward, and Fernando, mimicking the movement with a swifter reaction than before, caused the dog to bark again. Surprisingly, not in a threatening tone, but one of playfulness. That first meeting between Signor Fernando and Merlina set the precedent for their relationship. So while other friends, such as Manuel T, Maria and the Major, made few overt gestures of friendship towards the dog, and as such was graced with her companionship, Fernando never stopped trying to befriend her. It was ironic that the dog approached the 3Ms without hesitation, but F was always greeted with excited barks, springing around, and games of British Bulldog. Not a very long chapter, I suppose, but there's a good few pages to go, so I'll continue part 2 of Merlina's story tomorrow. But before that, as you can see, our Merlina is still okay, still doing all right, emails. Looking forward to going out for a stroll in this atrocious weather, but we'll put on our raincoats and we'll be on our way. Okay, until tomorrow. Well, Adem and ya. Ciao.